is this really better than having an eating disorder? Because for me, honestly, quasi-recovery was worse than having an eating disorder.
My life was a bit more tolerable, but it wasn't better. And then
we get so obsessed with watching other people's journeys and what I eat in a days, and this is what I eat when I have extreme hunger, and then feeling like, oh no, well, my extreme hunger is too extreme because they're not eating as much as me.
You have the power. Drop all the bullshit.
What was the biggest thing that you did to recover from your eating disorder? Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Live Label Free podcast. I'm your host, Livia Sarah, and if you are a loyal listener of this podcast, you hopefully listened to last week's episode in which I talked to Wouter Kleinsman, which you can tell by the last name is Victoria Kleinsman's husband. So in typical autistic fashion, I felt it only made sense to speak to Victoria, or at least release the podcast episode in which I am speaking to Victoria the week after the podcast with Wouter released. And full transparency here, my podcast episodes are all very, very planned in advance because, again, hide their autistic brain that needs predictability and always needs a buffer because, oh gosh, we need to prepare for every worst case scenario, right? Anyways, because everything had to align in my mind, so not only was the sequence of podcast episodes as follows: Wouter Kleinsman, Victoria Kleinsman, and I'm going to tell you the episode that's going to come out next in just a moment because it is super exciting, so I want to keep it a surprise for just a few minutes longer. But today, with Victoria, we are talking about quasi-recovery, and more specifically, we are talking about our experiences with quasi-recovery and how it was worse than being like full-blown committed to the eating disorder. And this episode actually did air on Victoria's podcast, The Body Love Binge, a little over a month ago, because we talked about my upcoming book, How to Get Out of Quasi-Recovery. Yes, very clever title. I know. Thank you very much. Anyways, you may have already listened to this episode on Victoria's podcast, and if you did, I would like to invite you to listen to it again because we always gain new insights and hear things in ways we may not have heard them before when we listen or come back to something another time, right? So that's why I myself often listen. I actually do listen to almost all of the conversations, all of the episodes I have on with my guests, because when you're immersed in the conversation in the moment, well, the way I speak, it's from the soul, which means that logically I have no idea what's going on. And most of the time, I just don't even realize the things I say during a podcast recording. Again, this is just the way that my being works. I do not operate in straight lines. My mind and my energy operate as bouncing balls going balls to the walls, up and down in every single direction possible. Hence why I often find myself in rabbit holes and having absolutely no freaking clue how I even got there because the ball just rolled where it wanted to roll. So, oh my gosh. Look at that. We're doing it again. We are in another rabbit hole. I don't even know what I was talking about. Victoria, podcast, Wouter, soul alignment, speaking from the soul. Oh yeah, and then ending up in rabbit holes. Oh my gosh, people. I scripted what I'm saying and it still happened. Like, this is what I mean. Like, I can't even follow my own script. Anyways, for the reason you just witnessed, this is why I script things a lot of the time. This is why I script my solo episodes. And part of that has to do with, of course, that I'm a writer and I love writing way more than I like speaking spontaneously, even though writing is often slower. But because my brain is very deep and the way I process is visually, I need to see words on a screen or on paper to almost know what I'm going to say next. And that's what prevents me from going down rabbit holes because I can't see like the words as I'm saying them spontaneously. I just lose track and I go all over the place, and then I get really anxious, and that's why I have social anxiety. But going back to why I listen to conversations I've had, I listen back to episodes that I record with guests because I actually hear myself say things in ways that I'm like, oh, that's it. That's actually a really interesting way of putting it. And this is often why I do record voice memos like on my walks. And yes, it's always on my walks because I have the most ideas and like explosions of creative insights when I am moving. Like it never happens when I'm just like sitting behind my laptop. So for me, most of the writing, like the actual like thought process of the writing happens when I'm moving, and I will record voice memos, or I will quickly type into my notes app, while I'm on the stationary bike at the gym, and then I'll come home and I'll have these like transcripts or just like discombobulated notes, what Mike calls Livia code that no one can understand, but I can understand it because like I know exactly what's happening, and those are like the most exciting moments for me to turn that compilation of notes and thoughts into a coherent story. That's what I love most about writing. And that being said, it actually also helps me to write more intentionally when I listen back to things I've said, when I was speaking from the souls, when I was in conversation, especially when I'm faced with that existential claustrophobia that I talked about in a few episodes ago, that we talked about in our Autistically ED Free membership call, which, that idea of I have so many ideas, but I just don't know how to put them into words. And by the way, if you are not already a member in the Autistically ED Free membership, please come join us. These conversations are some of the most magical, complex, soul deep conversations that I've ever had in my life. And I have recently, especially the past few months, been in a really, really difficult period of what I like to call existential autistic burnout, because people often talk about autistic burnout, being due to masking and too many demands from the external world and sensory sensitivities. And while these are all very valid contributors to burnout, especially in autistic people, why is no one talking about like existential burnout, like the existential autistic burnout, this experience of having a mind that is constantly asking why, that is constantly going faster than the physical body can even keep up with, like the exhaustion and the burnout that arises from this deep, deep questioning. Anyways, like I have so many thoughts about that, and I do have another book that I've been writing about autistic burnout in which I talk about this, but that'll be a few more years, because again, existential claustrophobia, I have so many books. They're all already written inside of my being, but now comes the task of actually materializing them, and that's the hard part, because I know that no matter what I say, no matter what I write, it will never, ever, ever reflect the richness which is my infinitely vast, abundant inner being. But here I go again, talking about a tangent. I swear, like, I cannot have a conversation ever again these days with it not going into some existential rabbit hole. Because, yes, this is probably why I have been burnt out, because my brain is doing this the entire time. But, we're going back to what I was saying about listening back to episodes that I've guested on, that I host myself, and I say things, and I'm like, wow, that's just the simplest, most beautiful way to say it. And I said it in precisely that way because I wasn't thinking about it, right? Because I was speaking from my soul without having this mind filter be in the way. Because, of course, that's all our minds are. They are filters. They are never pure because everything we believe has somehow been, poisoned by the external world. And this is, the power of following your heart and letting your soul speak and nudge you forward rather than using your mind, which all, of course, ties back to eating disorder recovery or how to get out of quasi recovery. Because I think we can get so, and I talk about this in my upcoming chat with Victoria, we get so obsessed with looking for a map and looking at what other people are doing and looking at other people's what I eat in a day videos. But the map is the trap, my friend. I literally say this in this episode. So yeah, clearly I could go on for hours about this, which is why I wrote a book, right? This is why I wrote How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery. And in fact, I didn't only write How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery, but surprise, I also created an accompanying discovery workbook. And I created this workbook so you can transform the insights from the main book into your unique action steps. So this isn't, another eating disorder recovery workbook filled with coping skills or those hunger fullness skills. I mean, rate your hunger on a scale from 1 to 10. I get a fucking allergic reaction every time I see or hear someone say that. Because especially for us autistic people, we all know that shit doesn't work. Because if it did, if, filling out these coping skills and, what action are you going to implement when you're faced with this? Or I don't know if anyone learned about that acronym like Dear Man. Oh my gosh, I remember doing, all the therapies and eating disorder treatment, like CBT and DBT, and there was this like skill called Dear Man. I can't even remember what it stands for. I'm sure if you just look up Dear Man, it's literally just DEARMAN, like DBT, you'll learn what it is. But I remember, struggling in eating disorder treatment and telling them I was struggling, and they would literally say, oh, like, look at your DBT book, like, what DBT skills can you apply? And I'm like, no human thinks like this. Like, if I'm in a difficult situation, I'm not gonna whip out my therapy book and look at fucking skills. Anyways, no hate on all the therapists that like DBT, no hate on anyone who likes DBT. I definitely think there are a lot of principles and concepts from these therapy modalities that are helpful, but I think we need to frame it in a way that it is almost like intuitive, because I think a lot of the skills come down to just basic human needs, the need for safety, the need to express yourself without judgment. And I'm just more of a fan of expressing it intuitively. That's why also with my coaching, I tell people ask me, how do you coach? A lot of times when I get new clients who come to me, they want to know exactly what we're going to do. And I tell them, like, I'm sorry, but, like, go find someone else then, because I do not coach based on these are the steps, 1, 2, 3, because, again, the map is the trap. If there was a map, what we would be doing is we wouldn't be creating your unique version of food, movement, body, freedom. So my approach, the honest answer is my approach is intuitive. I think, the relationship, the validation, feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling understood, the power of lived experience, the fact that I literally was once you. I literally had the thoughts that you have, the fears that you have, and I have come out the other side. I mean, I don't think I've said this a million times before on this podcast, but I don't think there's any more valuable than that. I love this metaphor of like learning to surf. I don't know how to surf, and I have no interest in learning how to surf, but if I wanted to learn how to surf, I could read 100 million books on surfing and the waves and the surfboard and how to stand on the surfboard, and very helpful information, I'm sure, but I will never know or learn how to surf unless I am willing to get up on that fucking surfboard and have someone who knows their shit help me. And in that sense, I would in that sense, I would much rather learn the craft, learn the art, learn the skill of surfing from someone who knows their shit than reading 1,000 books. And again, this all ties back to eating disorder recovery, because you can watch all the YouTube videos you want, you can listen to all the podcasts that you want, you can look at all the Instagram reels you want, but no one is going to recover for you. You will never, ever, ever know what it's like to live free from an eating disorder. Yes, that is the subtitle of my book, so shameless plug here. You will never know what it is like to live free from an eating disorder until you decide to live free from an eating disorder, until you decide that the path of restriction and eating disorder behaviors and compensation and what have you, until you decide that that is simply not an option anymore. So here we did it again. I literally went way off script for like the past 6 minutes. So back to why I'm releasing this episode with back to why I am releasing this episode right now with Victoria is because, my friends, the time has aligned. Next week, Tuesday, June 24, 2025, my book, How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery, Live Free from an Eating Disorder, and the accompanying Discovery Workbook will be out and live and launched into the world for you to consume, no pun intended. And honestly, I am kind of speechless because I'm just very, 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 very proud of this book. Because, as I've said before, it is probably the most, well, it is the most philosophical piece of art that I've ever created and decided to put out into the world, because I have a lot of philosophical ponderings in my journal, which I may or may not publish one day in the form of like a diaries kind of thing. But yep, another book idea that I've had to park because priorities, and you can't do everything at the same time. And this book, How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery, I think it is now even more relevant than ever because I have been diving way more into existentialism and tying that to the autism and eating disorder connection. So yeah, I think it's so important that people really start understanding what's at the root of not only the eating disorder, but also what I call the next illusion after the eating disorder, which is this recovery identity. This is, I can't do it. I'm scared. I have these fears because I'm in recovery. It's because you don't know who you are when you are your authentic self. You don't know who you are when you stop wearing these masks of the eating disorder and recovery and all the external labels that we put on, because we are so afraid of facing our true selves. And oh gosh, you can tell I'm gonna really freaking fired up here. But this is where How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery comes in as your guidebook to breaking free. It helps you unleash the artist that you are. It helps you move forward on your unique path. It teaches you how to stop conforming, how to stop following in others' footsteps, so you can finally create the freedom that only you can create, because it's never been created before. Again, that goes all back to the map is the trap, because, and I'm going to say this in an upcoming episode, like, a map is a predetermined path that's already been followed, and how can you ever live your unique existence if you're following in someone else's footsteps? You will forever live as a shadow, right? So yeah, I'm so excited for you to read this book, How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery. If you enjoy this podcast, or if you enjoy listening to me, or if you have resonated with anything I've ever said, and you are stuck in recovery and you do feel, who will you be when you don't have an eating disorder anymore? Who will you be when you are yourself? This book is for you. I wrote this book for you, and it will be available in all formats, so paperback, ebook, and audiobook, narrated by me, of course. And the Discovery Workbook will be available in four formats, actually. It's not going to be an audiobook because I figured it would just sound clunky to read questions and prompts to you for an entire book. But it will be available in multiple formats that will make it accessible to people of all abilities. So it will be available as an EPUB, which stands for electronic publication file, which you can read on like your Kindle or your e-reader or even your phone if you want to. And if you order from my books website, livelabelfreebooks.com, I love saying it like that, livelabelfreebooks.com. I don't say it like livelabelfreebooks.com. Livelabelfreebooks.com. Okay, anyways, if you order it from there, there will be a PDF file, which is just a digital replica of the print version, but then And this is thanks to a genius recommendation of one of my clients who is blind. Shout out to you, Charlie, if you were listening to this. There will also be a Word document of the Discovery Workbook that you can type or dictate into. But even if you're not blind, I created this Word doc because if you don't want to write, like you don't want to write in a paper notebook or whatever, but you also don't want to write in a journal, like separately, if you get the EPUB on Amazon, you can just type directly into the Word document, which I think is pretty darn cool. Because honestly, even for me, I do most of my journaling in my Notes app or in Google Docs because of that existential claustrophobia, and physically writing by hand, just my hands can't keep up with the speed of my thoughts. But going back to the workbook formats, there will also be a paperback, obviously. Oh wait, I just realized there's actually going to be 5 formats of the Discovery Workbook. So there's going to be a paperback on Amazon, and the paperback will be just like a regular old paperback, just like the main Quasi recovery book. But if you order via my online books website, and guys, I'm going to do it again, livelabelfreebooks.com, the physical Discovery Workbook is a spiral-bound notebook, which I created specifically, I created specifically for my book's website, because if I had a workbook and I was writing by hand, because sometimes I do need to write by hand, like when I really need to connect with the page, I would prefer that it would be like an actual notebook rather than just like a regular book. So I'm sure you guys know what I mean here. So anyways, not to get too deep into all of the details because this is what my brain does, I did want to share all of that with you because I want to get that excitement going. I want you to know what's coming because we all value predictability, right? And if you're listening to this episode like way after the fact, like way after it comes out, which is June 17th, I believe, well, then you're probably listening to this way after my books come out, and well, here you go. The books are out. The books are out everywhere. You can now find How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery at livelabelfree.com/Quasi Recovery Book. And you can find the Discovery Workbook at livelabelfree.com/Discovery Workbook. And of course, you can bundle them. You can bundle the books together on my books website, livelabelfreebooks.com, to get a discount. And I, of course, will leave all the links in the show notes as well, because I know I said a lot of links today. And yeah, just a quick heads up before we dive into this episode with Victoria, because it was recorded for her podcast over a month ago, and How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery was not out yet, Victoria does ask at the beginning of the episode, when does your book come out? And I say, I have no fucking clue. I wanted it to come out in May, but we are now in June. So a month later, that's not too bad, right? Well, not bad at all, because bad is a label. There's no good, bad, right, wrong. We said in the episode that time doesn't exist because, everything happens when it's aligned. So all that being said, the time has finally aligned. The books have aligned. Victoria and I are aligned. So yeah, I am going to stop rambling on now because this intro has literally turned into a solo episode. So let's just start listening to the episode with me and Victoria. So here we go. Without further ado, here is my episode on how to get out of quasi recovery with Victoria Kleinsman.
Livia consents to be recorded. That's a good job because she's here on the podcast again, everybody. Welcome, Livia. Welcome back.
Thank you. I can't believe it's been a year since we did a podcast together. It was in May of last year that you were on my podcast to talk about extreme hunger.
Wow, time flies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Although
That was for my other book.
Indeed. And now we're talking about this book that's coming out. When is it coming out, by the way?
Honestly, I wanted it to come out in May, but with the books, as you know, writing a book, it always, life gets not in the way, but life has other plans for you as you have just experienced to the maximum potential.
Yes.
So I don't know when it's coming out yet. It's gonna come out when the time is aligned.
There you go. My next thing was going to say there is no time actually. So time flies, but all we have is presence and now anyway. So
Right? Yep. Time is a construct of the human mind. It's an attempt to make the intangible tangible. That's all it is.
yeah. And talking about your book, which is, I said before I hit record to the listeners, for the listeners' benefit, Liffy's book is fucking phenomenal. There's so much in this book, and I've not even got through it yet, that goes so deep, and it's
Mhm.
so aligned with the way you and I just both are and how we chat outside of like recording,
Yes.
how we see
Yeah.
life, the depth that we go and the way that we get to create and choose in our own power. That book
Yes.
for me so far is just mirroring back, you have the power, drop all the bullshit. Everything that's been put on you in terms of labels and even recovering, which I'm going to leave you to talk about, is a label and that can hinder us. So,
Yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, let me start by asking you, Olivia, why did you write the book? Well, first of all, hold on, backtrack. What's the book called and why did you write it?
Okay, well, the book is called, very classic, How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery. And I now finally know how to pronounce quasi
I
correctly.
don't. Now I do
'Cause
then, okay?
I know, I know we were, well, okay, because you have the British accent, and the British is actually different. But I know in American English it is quasi. And I actually had a note when I was recording the audiobook of like
Oh,
Kwahzei, like quasi, like Livia. Every time you record in big, this is the pronunciation, because
so
that's
smart.
that's the funny thing about when you record an audiobook, you realize that so many words that you know how to spell and can read, you don't actually know how to pronounce them.
Yeah.
So you run into that. Yeah, so it's called How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery, and the subtitle is Live Free from an Eating Disorder. Yep, I was very proud of that
Play on
construction.
words. Love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, oh my gosh, I love semantics. I think because words are always a label in and of themselves, and you actually introduced me to the book Conversations with God,
Mm.
and I may have reflected this back to you, but in the one of the first few chapters of that book, they talk about how words allow us to understand something, but experience allows us to truly know it. And
Yes.
I highlighted, like mentally highlighted the shit out of that sentence, because that is exactly, everything we're talking about here. And so the reason that I wrote How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery is because there were so many themes that kept coming up, not only in my work with clients, and I'm sure in your work too, but just advice and messaging, and almost, if I may say it, like propaganda
Mm.
propagating the eating disorder recovery space, that there's a right way to recover and there's a wrong way, and you should throw out the scales, you should get rid of the calorie counting apps. Basically, all these new sets of rules around how to quote unquote properly overcome an eating disorder. And to me, I reached this point where it hit my soul so hard of like, aren't you basically just creating the next illusion after an eating disorder? And that's what quasi recovery is, in my opinion. The eating disorder is a false identity. It's, this belief of, I need this in my life to cope. I'm a victim to this illness. I'm powerless. I can't do anything. I can't eat more because I have an eating disorder. And then when you are like sick and tired of the eating disorder and you're like, okay, I'm gonna recover, but there's a catch. I need to recover right. I need to gain weight, quote unquote, the healthy way. I
Mm.
can't gain weight too fast because no, that's too risky. So there's all these new rules that come in, and then you're trapped again. And then the question is, is this really better than having an eating disorder? Because for me, honestly, quasi recovery was worse than having an eating
Same.
disorder.
Same.
Because, and this brings me to another quote that you introduced me to, and that was, it is so much harder to go 99% than
Well, it's
something, yeah.
about being committed.
Mm-hmm.
So being 100% committed is simple, and being
Mm-hmm.
99% committed is hell.
And that's quasi recovery. It's
Yeah.
saying, I'm going to recover, but there's always a catch. And as long as there's a catch, well, we might as well go back to bed.
Yeah, I feel the same because for me, when I was in, I say it quasi. Is that right? Wrong?
I
I mean,
think,
right, wrong? What the fuck have I even asked that question for? I'm saying
well,
it quasi recovery, so there.
but yeah, yeah, and I mean, again, like as long as everyone knows what you're saying, that's
Yes.
something that I've been working on too. For me as a writer, you may have noticed with my book now compared to my previous books, like I have definitely advanced and improved as a writer in explaining topics, especially nuanced topics like
Yes.
these.
Yeah.
And the writing, I've noticed for me, it has become exponentially more difficult to express myself because we are going deeper,
Yeah.
because the labels aren't there as accessible. And for me, something that I've really had to remind myself every time I have this fight or flight response of, well, what if you don't say it in the perfect way?
Mm.
It's reminding myself, Livia, as long as everyone understands what you're saying, say it, move on.
Yeah.
That's.
Just be unapologetically you, which can you
Yep.
see the description of my name on this podcast?
Yeah, unapologetically me.
I just felt like putting that in as I was entering the room today. But as I was saying, for me in quasi recovery, I'd gain weight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was, and I'd gain weight, and I'd say improved 80% of my ED behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
But I was still living very much like, let's say, 20% in the eating disorder.
Mm-hmm.
It was worse because I wasn't fully recovered. I was micromanaging my behaviors and pretending
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't control, it was moderation, and putting
Yeah.
the health bracket around
Mm.
it.
Yeah.
Because I'd gained weight and hadn't yet done all the soul searching and coming back home to myself and being
Mm-hmm.
unapologetically me,
Mm-hmm.
it was so hard and my life was a bit more tolerable, but it wasn't better. And then I heard a quote, and I don't know who it was from, and I'm sorry for not complimenting this person. It might have probably been from a book, knowing me. And it said something like, there's two questions you can ask yourself. They're both the same question, but when I ask you both of them, you'll see why I'm sharing it this way. And then I
Uh-huh.
flipped in that moment. So the
Uh-huh.
first question you can ask yourself is this bad enough to change? The second question you can ask yourself is this good enough to stay?
Is this bad enough to change? Yes. Yeah, because there's such a I mean, as you would describe, you've told me before like how we are awake and there's so many people that are asleep in this world. I
Mhm.
think someone who is asleep would say that's the exact same fucking question. But
Yeah,
there's a difference because there's a nuance to
exactly.
it.
It's the difference for me is the power you have. So if I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at it from the perspective of, oh, is this bad enough to change?
Mm-hmm.
That's from like low self-worth, kind of not being in victim if you're going to change it, but just struggling and suffering and
Mm-hmm.
getting by. Whereas if you take a look and you're like, is this good enough to stay? Hell no. It's not good
Right.
enough to stay. I choose better for myself. So therefore you can create change more from a place of like stepping into change other than kind of trying to force yourself and push yourself to change. There's a difference.
I love that you just brought this I love that you just brought this up because it kind of reminds me of and I think, yeah, I definitely talk about this in the book. I just don't know where and what chapter. But about this idea that so often, when people are deciding to let go of their eating disorder, they're so based on everything they don't want. I don't want mental hunger. I don't want to feel miserable. I don't want the anxiety. I don't want this.
Mm.
Sorry, it's still early for me, so my throat is still warming up.
No
Um,
worries at all.
um, but then often, when I ask them in coaching, okay, well, what do you want? They have no fucking clue. They say, well, I just don't want to have the eating disorder, and I'm
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, if you don't know what you do want, good luck getting there. It's like me saying, I'm going to take a flight to Asia. Like, please give me my ticket, and then them saying, okay, but like, where in Asia? I don't know. I just want to go there. It's like,
I just don't want to go to
well,
Europe. Well,
yeah, you just
where do you want to
right.
go?
And I'm actually reminded of the conversation you had with Wouter on your podcast. Oh my gosh. We have to do a podcast together and I'm still
We will.
planning my podcast with him. But it's been kind of navigating the time cuz I know he like just recently updated his entire website or something,
Yes.
which
The
I know
sexiest book
is
website.
a what?
A sexiest book website.
Oh,
CAS.
I'm going to check it out. Yeah, because website design is something that I love to do. But anyways, that's another topic. We were talking. Oh yeah, he said on your podcast together. He said it is very important to know where you are and where you want to go. And then it was funny because I was listening to the podcast while I was walking in southern France. And he said, if you're in France, you need to know you're in France. And it was like, how is that even aligning right now? But yeah, I mean, I think that is a big part of the reason why people do stay stuck in quasi recovery is because when you ask them, okay, where do you want to go? It's like that question is so terrifying because they don't even want to admit to themselves that they have wants and desires in this life because that's not okay because that
Yeah,
means you can actually be satisfied. That's dangerous because if you're satisfied, well then what's the purpose? What is the thing to worry about? There's
yeah,
like this anxiety addiction,
yeah,
and that's what the eating disorder is fueled by because there's always something to be worried about. There's always that scarcity and negativity and negative energy flowing into everything. And now I remember the chapter. I have two chapters in the quasi recovery book. The first one is called What Do You Need? And the next one is called What Do You Want?
yeah,
And I talk about in the What Do You Need chapter, like we ask ourselves, what do we need? Because it's easier than asking ourselves what we want. Because if you say, well, I need proof of the outcome first, I need to know that my mental hunger will go away, I need to know what weight my body will settle at.
mm,
One, because I don't know those things yet. Oops, can't do anything. I'm still the victim. But when we ask, what do I want? And I say, I want food freedom and whatever that means to me, because obviously that you have to clarify what that means for you
yes,
as a
yeah,
unique human. Well, you just said, oh my gosh, well, for me to get that, I have to take responsibility. Oh, no, 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 that's scary.
people
And
don't
I
want
think, yeah, people don't, because, no, because taking responsibility is hard and being a victim is easy. Like, let's just lay it on the table.
it is because we're taught to be a victim
Mm-hmm.
right from the get-go.
Yep.
And it wasn't until there's an Instagram post I did ages ago. I think I've pinned it at the top of my
Mm-hmm.
Instagram. And it was talking about the three lessons I learned that enabled me to fully recover. And if I
Mm-hmm.
remember correctly, the first one was like, no one's going to come and save me. And when
Yep.
I realized that, like truly realized it, not just understood it intellectually, but really grasped
Mm-hmm.
that no one's going to come
Yep.
to save me, only I can change. I
Mm-hmm.
felt very lonely, very
Yeah.
annoyed, very sad, very
Mm.
scared. And then I was like, no one's coming to save me. So
Yep.
therefore, I get to save myself. Although going even deeper, I never even needed saving in the first place. I just needed to choose
Mm-hmm.
what I wanted and go after that. But that gave me so much, not power over, but so much empowerment within myself. Once I've
Yep.
grieved the loss of thinking and hoping and wishing someone was going to come and save me, so that's a
Yes.
big part. That was a big part for me anyway, to take full responsibility and swap what responsibility meant to me. Because
Yep.
I used to view responsibility as pressure and having to get it
Yes.
right and
To
like
get it right. Mm-hmm.
pressure. But when I decided to make responsibility mean it's my ability to respond,
Mm-hmm.
no pressure, I get to choose,
Yes. Yep.
it was easier to move forward from a place of space. You know what I mean? Other than like,
Right.
oh my God, is this right? So much pressure, so much weight. What if, what if, what if? It was like,
Right.
it doesn't matter about the what if anymore.
Yes. Yeah, and exactly. And I love that you said, only you can save yourself because I'm pretty sure I say that in multiple different
You
forms
do.
throughout my book.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, because I prefer the term discovery over the term recovery
Yeah.
because recovering from an eating disorder isn't actually about recovering from the eating disorder because the eating disorder came into your life to serve a purpose. So if you're just going to recover from the eating disorder, you're going to get it all over again because you're not addressing what's underneath. And that is, discovering and embracing who you are.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm just going to read one of the sentences of the saving you. It's, I say discovery isn't something that happens while you wait for someone or something to come save you. No, discovery happens when you put yourself out there, take risks, and trust that you can learn whatever you don't yet know. Because that's, of course, the ultimatum. I need to know XYZ before I can take action. When you replace judgment with curiosity, you start seeing what no one else sees. You encounter unpredictable outcomes, which provide you with fuel to create remarkable art. And I say this quote very intentionally because, I just do Command F in my manuscript because I know where everything is. I remember, I think that the art and the contribution and bringing meaning to this world, I think that's ultimately why we are on this planet. And we were kind of talking about that with the kid thing before, is
Yeah.
that so many people, including myself, there's this, why would I bring a kid into this horrible world? But you can flip it to, well, this kid can contribute and bring meaning and goodness into the world. And that's how we can be ourselves too. And I think,
Mm.
and this ties actually to the whole body thing of like, in the book I talk about the body not being your possession, it being just a manifestation of energy.
Yeah.
It's the vessel that allows you to contribute. And I kind of basically say that if you're not going to treat that vessel with respect, you're actually disrespecting the planet at large, because you didn't come on to the planet, or you didn't come into the world, you literally came out of the planet. Like,
Yeah.
you were like, so if you are going to, it's like beating up a beautiful tree and constantly
Yeah.
saying, I'm not going to give you sunlight, I'm not going to give you water, you don't deserve that, you're not worthy. Well, that's exactly what you're doing when you are engaging with an eating disorder.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we are nature, but we've come so far away from
Mm-hmm.
that. You know,
Right.
I enjoy the luxuries that we've created in society. I enjoy
Mm-hmm.
lots of them. Like we have a house with warmth and with running water and all the things, but we
Yeah.
forget that we literally are nature.
Yeah.
And so, to use your analogy about the tree, that's exactly right. Trees don't always grow perfectly, whatever that means. Like you said in your book, perfection is boring anyway, and it's never
Yeah.
attainable. We
Right.
don't look at mountain ranges and be like, oh, it just needs, I wish it was like looking like this, or that in comparison to this is shit. We just,
Yep.
well, most of us, I assume, just accept the beauty of nature as it is. And
Mm-hmm.
part of the discovering yourself, for me anyway, was just fully first accepting who and what I am
Mm-hmm.
unapologetically. And anything that
Mm-hmm.
my ego didn't like and wanted to be different, aka my body size, I just saw it in comparison to nature and
Yep.
started to see it from a different lens. So if I stopped trying to see my body as the thin, disciplined six-pack body, if
Mm-hmm.
every time I looked in the mirror, I was kind of hoping to see that, even though I knew that was gone,
Mm-hmm.
was creating suffering for myself. Whereas if I
Yep.
chose to see myself through the lens of my body's a goddess, I've given birth, I'm producing
Mm-hmm.
milk, like all this stuff that the body does all by itself without me having to do anything or ask it to do anything, I
Mm-hmm.
choose to see the beauty of my body in a different way. And that for me is freedom. True
Yep.
surrender is freedom, and I'm not here to be
Mm-hmm.
perfect. I'm here to be free. And so
Yep.
again, it comes down to every moment we feel that we're fighting or resisting what is, or we wish things were different, we get to choose in that moment to be free. And I simply say, what would freedom do? And then I do that.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, surrender is freedom. I
Yeah.
think that's so, so powerful. And it's funny you actually brought this up because the other day someone asked me, a parent asked me, okay, well, what was the biggest thing that you did to recover from your eating disorder? Like, what was the, oh my God, I always get this wrong, switch you flipped, what, you know what I'm saying? What
Switch.
was the switch that you flipped? And I said, actually, I didn't do anything. I
Mm.
stopped trying to do anything. I
Yes.
surrendered.
Yes.
That is a game fucking changer. And going back to the perfectionism thing, I'm sure you know Julia Cameron of The Artist's Way with the morning pages.
Yeah.
I quote her in the book twice, actually, because she was one of the first people that had so poignantly expressed, so succinctly in her book, about perfectionism not actually being about trying to be perfect, but it's about looking for failures. Like, and even for me, it's something that I struggle with, and I remind myself because I'm so aware of what perfectionism actually is. When I'm going back to read my quasi recovery manuscript for the 8th time because I want to make sure there's no typos or issues in there. And I mean, I'm saying, I just want it to be perfect. But what am I actually doing? I'm actively looking for mistakes. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what we do with when we're in quasi recovery, and that's why I think we get so obsessed with watching other people's journeys and what I eat in a days, and this is what I
Yeah.
eat when I have extreme hunger, and then feeling like, oh no, well my extreme hunger is too extreme because they're not eating as much as me.
Yeah.
Well, what have you just done? You have sought out a reason why the way you're doing it is wrong. Okay, proof that I can't recover. See,
Yes.
I'm a
Yeah.
victim all over again.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up because so many of my clients and the old me as well, not going to lie,
Oh, same.
they're on a roll and it's like, yeah, this feels great. And then something comes in their life where they compare themselves to
Yep.
what I eat in the day or how much I move in recovery. And it's like, oh my God, I must be doing it wrong then.
Yeah.
But there is no right or wrong because you've opened this podcast to talking about something quite nuanced, like recovery doesn't have to be getting rid of the scales. Recovery doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to be letting go of counting calories. For me, it had to be that way, but for you, not. Especially with
Right.
the people that you support, neurodivergency,
Yeah.
you speak, you're the expert of your own experience. Actually, taking those things away can hinder their recovery. So, do you want to talk a bit
Right.
about how there is no right way to recover, but also speak to the people who are listening to this and then being like, oh shit, should I now then be counting calories? And should I then, like, the people who are keep questioning themselves all the time?
Yeah, well, I think I love that you just brought up this idea of, well, maybe I should count calories, maybe I should keep the scale. This is the trap because this is the labels. This is there is a should or a shouldn't. There
Yeah,
is a right or wrong. And we secretly wish there was a right or wrong
yeah,
because if there was, well, then we don't have to make the decision ourselves. We don't have to ask the question, well, what do I want? Because
mm,
that comes, and this is the topic that, is woven through the entire book. It's
yeah,
kind of like the thread that connects everything, and that is the existentialism. That is this idea that we are free beings and we get to choose what our life looks like. And that's why there's so much written about existential angst. And the existentialist Soren Kierkegaard called it the dizziness of freedom. When we are free, it can be dizzying, it can be mentally paralyzing because there's not one or two paths to go down, there's not right or wrong path. You can go wherever the frick you want.
well,
And
you can create a path to go down.
exactly. And it's like, but it's like, okay, but if I go that way, how do I? And then here comes the no and the knowledge. Well, then how do I know that I'm not supposed to go that way? But it's
Because
like,
you went that way, that's how you know.
well, and that's again the supposed to thing.
Yeah,
Supposed to is just another form of should and shouldn't and right and wrong. And I think that's where the real work is. It's really being brutally honest with yourself about what do I want out of life? What do I want to contribute to this planet? And that ties to, greater meaning and purpose, this idea of, I need to find my purpose. No, you don't. You need,
no.
like, purpose is not found. It's not hiding under your uh, rug or whatever. Like, you create your purpose.
Yeah,
And that's what we are doing, the coaching, the helping other people, the guiding other people to freedom and abundance, this wasn't hiding under our rug or
no.
our bed or whatever. We actively chose to create meaning through this manifestation of work or whatever. See, I can't even find the labels now because there aren't any, because this work we do is just, I almost want to say it's universal, not like, not like in the traditional sense of universal means like, oh, it's a global phenomenon. I mean universal in the sense that the work we do is based on, it's almost operating in another dimension.
Mm.
Like, if Earth is like 3D, we are in like infinity D operating. And that's why when I met you and I asked you, what is your coaching approach based on? You replied, it's based on love. I don't know if you remember saying that, but that's how I knew, like, we are kindred spirits. Because in the end, the only thing, the only force, the only energy that guides us to what is true freedom and true abundance is love.
Is love. And the opposite to love is fear, but that's just an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is
Fear
an
is a
illusion.
story.
It's a
Fear is a
story.
lie.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
only truth is love, and everything that we do as humans is either an act of love or a cry for love. Even the really fucked up things,
Yep.
it's a cry for love. So when we know that all there is love, like the eating disorder voice that is constantly telling us we're not good enough, we're too fat, we're too this, we're not enough, blah blah blah. Underneath the reason for it telling you those things, it wants to protect you. It loves you so much. It's
Mm-hmm.
trying to take care of you and protect you in the only way it knows how. Like you said, it's an adaptation, it's a coping mechanism. So
Yep.
if you strip away the need for the coping mechanism, this is
Mm-hmm.
why mine and your coaching are so similar. We don't just fix the behaviors, we don't
Right.
just recover or help people recover.
Mm-hmm.
We help people to come. It's on my website. I think there's literally a sentence that's saying, I help you return back home to self-love, because you don't have
Mm-hmm.
to learn how to love yourself. You already know.
Yep.
How can you learn to do what you are? The sun doesn't learn how to shine. It is, right?
Yeah.
Little
Yep.
story again from a book. I don't know which book, about the sun. And I think someone from Earth, like the some, I don't know, species animals from Earth, were saying to the sun, "Hey, come and check out these dark caves. Like it doesn't feel right. There's some dark energies in these dark caves. So come and check it out so you can see for yourself." So the sun comes down into these dark
Oh,
caves,
I
and
love it. I
I
know
can't
where this
see
is
any
going.
darkness because
I
that's what we
Wow.
are. That's my
What a
job, to reflect back to my clients. You're the fucking sun. You are infinite love and infinite creation and infinite possibility. Own the
right.
shit out of that. Go
Yep.
create. Have fun.
Yes, yes, and that kind of comes back to, the fear versus love thing, because that's again why people ask, well, what's the right way, what's the wrong thing? Because they fear that they can't trust themselves. But it's like that
Yeah.
question you posed before is, instead of asking, what's the right or wrong way, instead ask yourself, what would the free me do? And this is literally a quote in how to get out of quasi recovery, because in the chapter about exercise, I'm sure you resonate with getting this question. It's like, okay, well, when should I
Oh,
exercise
yeah.
in recovery? And I'm like, whenever the fuck you want. And it's like, yeah, but like, I don't know when that is. But I'm like, well, are you asking when you want to? Oh, no, I'm just looking for a how to. But
Yeah,
as long as you're looking for a how to, you're never going to find your way, because your way doesn't come with the how to. Otherwise, that would have meant you existed before and you didn't.
exactly. And speaking to people who might be thinking, oh, I can therefore exercise because I want to, but is it the I? Or is it the eating disorder that is now seeing this conversation as a permission slip to continue compensating through exercise? It's
Yeah.
the question, is this thought, is this action from love? Is it born from
Yes.
love? Or is it born from fear? And only the person asking themselves that question really knows the answer. Because someone in recovery
Exactly.
like myself could exercise. I changed my exercise completely. I went from doing 1.5 hour hit, which is supposed to be like 10 minutes, but I did an hour and a half because
Uh
obviously
huh.
I was overachieving, to like some yoga and some weights. But because I was choosing it from a place of love, it was
Exactly.
right for me. Whereas if someone was still doing weights and yoga from a place of the eating disorder and from a place of fear, then that's quote unquote not the right, in quotes, because there's no language really here, for them.
Right. Exactly. And then that all comes back to the question of, what would the free me be doing? What would the
Yeah.
me who is living in alignment with their authentic, loving self be doing? If
Yeah.
you ask that question, well, you're probably not going to walk away from this conversation with, oh, well, Victoria and Livia said that it's okay for me to start exercising. No, because if you're now going to start exercising because of this conversation, you're doing it based off of what someone else said or thinks. Again, you're not doing it because of your own reasons. And that's
Exactly.
not freedom.
It's not freedom. And I love that you brought that up, because I often say a lot to my clients. I used to say, until I evolved some more, what would, if you like, you are recovering from an eating disorder, so what would my recovering self do? Now, there is a time and a place for this, because if someone's just, let's say, coming out of anorexia recovery and they jump to their what would the free version of me do, I guess actually saying this out loud, this would still work. But let me back up here. What I'm saying is, when we keep referring to recovering me, I'm recovering from an eating disorder, we can keep, as you address in the book, we can keep ourselves stuck because we're still acting from a reaction to an eating disorder because we're in recovery. Whereas when we're truly free, it's not about forgetting the past. It's not about forgetting where we've come from and what we've achieved or who we are, who we were. It's about choosing to act as that free version. So when we're acting because of something, that's still a reaction to the thing that we were reacting from. Are you with me? So sometimes when we're recovering, we can keep ourselves in active recovery when actually we're already done, we're already in freedom, yet we're keeping ourselves in recovering. Asking that question. Does that, I know I've rambled. Does that
no, I mean, and this is why I know that we can have these deep conversations, because I'm like, okay, I'm poignantly aware, and I know I've used that word poignant before, but do you ever have where you like rediscover a word and then you just like can't stop using?
Yeah.
Like poignant, it's such a poignant word. Because when we communicate, it's like we just get each other, even though I'm so poignantly or acutely aware that, like, I think if someone else who's not on our same level would be listening to what you were saying, they'd be like, what the fuck did she just say? But I'm reminded of a podcast Wouter did, and his podcasts are all in Dutch, by the way. But I love that. But he has a podcast that's called Je bent er al, which means you're already there. You're already there. And he talks in that podcast about, like, you get to decide whether you're already there or not. And I think that's, again, the whole recovery, being recovered thing. And I'm never going to forget this session because this was one of the clearest breakthroughs I have ever seen in my entire life. One of my clients who had been struggling with anorexia for 7 years, same length that I was, she came to one of our sessions and we were talking about this, like, you get to decide when you're done fighting, when you're just going to surrender and you're just going to live your life and be in alignment with yourself. And she said on that session, I'm recovered. I'm done. I'm recovered. And that was it. That was the end of the eating disorder era. It was the end of it was the end of quasi recovery because she, and oh my gosh, decided to cut herself off from anything other than being in alignment with her true self.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I mean, this person who you're describing, I'm sure after that conversation that she had with you, she felt feelings she didn't want to feel because her brain hadn't rewired yet into the freedom version of her.
Right.
Yet, just because we feel feelings we don't want to feel, our feelings are not facts. We are not our feelings. We are not a slave or a victim to our feelings. We can feel them, create space for them, welcome them, let them go, and still fucking decide to do something different than what the brain or our feelings want us to do. And then lo and behold, with repetition and consistency, and not that long really in time, or in quotes, recovered. There's no more rewiring to do. There's no more choosing to do because you are that. And then you get to choose other things to expand and evolve even more.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm happy you brought that up because it was funny because in that session when she said I'm recovered, I'm done, she kind of wanted to also be done with the coaching because she was like, I don't need this anymore because I'm recovered, I'm done. But then, like, the next day she was like, oh my God, like, this is actually fucking hard because, as you say, she hadn't done the rewiring yet.
Yes.
So I think it's really good. We had sessions after that, but she realized, and again, it became so clear to me that when you do decide, and I know you know the Latin root of this word, to decide means to cut yourself off. And I think when you know that, and I talk about this quasi recovery, I am honestly shocked that I write so much in pretty short book actually because I write very succinctly, but I think when you are so aware of the fact what decide actually means, when you intentionally make a decision, the decision becomes infinitely more powerful because you know what that decision means. And for her, yeah, like she was faced with the challenges of like honoring the extreme hunger and honoring the mental hunger and stop bullshitting herself about like, oh well, maybe my mental hunger is not valid, maybe I'm just emotionally eating, all the stuff
Oh,
that the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
restrictive fear-based mind tells you. But because she had decided she was recovered, she had no other choice but to act in alignment with herself. So there was no pretending that the mental hunger wasn't valid because she had decided she was going to stop pretending
Yeah, when
because
you
she was recovered. Yeah.
she decided, and people don't want to hear this because it's so simple. It's so
Yeah.
simple. And I remember when I truly got this, again, I had to intellectually understand it first and be like, yeah, 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 I get it, I get it, I get it. But then I had to live it to really
Yep.
get it and embody that. And then when I did embody that, part of me was pissed off because I was like, wait, it's been that fucking simple this entire time. And I've struggled for
Yeah.
like 20 years with other different stuff as well around my body, not
Right.
just the eating disorder. I can literally decide in the moment to be free.
Right.
And when I used to hear people say, just choose to be happy, it used to really fuck me off because I'd be like, how can you just choose to be happy? And obviously,
Mm-hmm.
you have to, first of all, understand what that even means. Like, you have to let
Right.
go of what's no longer serving you, decide this is what you want, and therefore just create it. We forget we're creators. And so,
Yep.
you mention about, I don't want to steal your quote, mention what you say about the map and following other people's map.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm gonna do a quick Command F again.
Yeah, you find it.
Map. Yeah. Well, I say like, well, okay, there's
There's lots of words to you.
11.
Why don't you say
Yeah.
more?
There's a few. Yeah, well, here's one that I found. I know how tempting it is to submerge yourself in quote unquote recovery advice and to scroll social media so you can follow someone else's map. But it's a lot more sustainable and fun to commit to creating your own way. Because when you stop trying to follow instructions and instead begin to trust your innate wisdom, you no longer have to fight a war that cannot be won.
Oh,
Um, which is a
yeah.
good one. Yeah.
In fact, I'm going to find it because because I'm writing an endorsement for this book and I wrote a quote
Yes.
down that I loved about the map. And it is, let me find it.
Yeah, I
Uh,
just found another one,
yeah.
and that is maybe this is the one that you have. I say, building my confidence through discovery was absent of shortcuts. There was no clear path, no map to navigate. It was just me and fear. Could I handle being alone with fear, alone without being accompanied by ED or recovery?
Mm, yes. Well, this one is, I think, is summarizing what you say about the map. When you stop following someone else's map, you start creating your own world.
Yes, yes.
And that landed for me so much because, I mean, yeah, me and Livia are speaking very boldly here, and we're not to say that whoever's listening to this can just instantly start. Let me back up. You can, everyone can start creating in
Mm-hmm.
this moment,
Right.
but we need people to help us get to the point where
Yeah.
what we're talking about now. You don't have to do this alone. You need help and structure and all these things, but
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, in my opinion, the most powerful coaching you can receive from anybody, plugging me and Livia here because this is how we coach,
Yeah.
is for us to reflect back to you over and over again. You have the power. You
Yep.
get to choose. Let me show
Right.
you how. Let me support you into how. Let yourself experience what we're talking about because it's beyond words here. It's an
Yep.
experience of a feeling within, like when you make your mind up. Because I remember when I decided to recover,
Mm-hmm.
again, I then overachieved at recovery, but it actually served me very well.
Yep.
It
Mm-hmm.
was a decision and I was like, what? This was my mantra, whatever it fucking takes, whatever it. So when I was literally on the floor with shame and self-hatred and hating my body and being so full I can't breathe and thinking, how is this okay? I'm just like paying someone to tell me it's okay to binge eat and all the things.
Yeah.
I was like, whatever it fucking takes. I had like a vision, not a clear vision. So anyone who's listening who's like, I don't know what I want, I can't create, you can because you are literally a creator. That's what and who you are. Just
Right.
a general vision of a word. Freedom was the word that I was going for. So in each moment, what would freedom do? And freedom
Mm-hmm.
is not does not allow fear to keep it stuck. it faces
Right.
fear, and then on the other side of that is freedom. So for me, you have to have, like you were saying before, a destination
Mm-hmm.
of where to go. Otherwise, you do end up being like, oh, what's he doing? What's she doing? Oh, she said do this. Maybe I should do that. Actually, maybe my mental hunger is
Right.
emotional eating. Yeah, maybe I'm binge eating now. Like, question, question, question.
Right.
To trust whatever you want is what you need.
Right, exactly. And even like to go as far as these questions, like maybe it isn't valid, maybe it's binge eating. Okay, maybe it is. Maybe it is. There's no objective truth. But it
Mhm.
goes back to what you said before. Is this bad enough to change, or am I okay enough to stay the same? Like for me, when I was, again, the fullness, not being able to breathe, oh gosh, I know that feeling. And
Yeah.
then still wanting to eat an
Yeah.
entire another cake. And then there was that thought of, am I developing binge eating disorder? What
Yeah.
was really helpful for me was to say, maybe I am, but there's only one way to find out, you
Yeah.
know?
I love that. That takes a lot of courage
Yeah.
because, yeah, I mean, we could be wrong in quotes about this whole philosophical stuff and I can't
Right.
say the word, spiritual stuff and surrender. If we've made it all up, it's a great place to be. It's a fantastic feeling to
Mm-hmm.
feel and to live every day of ultimate surrender. And like, I went from when I was diagnosed with binge eating, and again, another label,
Mm-hmm.
I went from being like, oh my God, I can't control my food to
Mm-hmm.
I can't control my food. So
Yeah.
I didn't put nice affirmations on, like, so when I was quote unquote binge eating, I would read stuff like, oh, tell yourself, like, you deserve this and it's all okay, which is true. But I didn't believe that. So me saying, like, this is okay, this is what I want, I went from that to, I can't control my food. So I may as well enjoy it. Like, I
Exactly.
literally can't control my food. Therefore, I'm choosing for that to be the most positive thing ever. I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to embrace that and surrender to that and live that. And then magically, I was free and just ate whatever I
Yes.
wanted, and not in reaction to anything, though.
I I love that you basically just said the exact same sentence but completely changed the meaning. And this is why nuance is so important. And this is why, to take that mental hunger example, like how do I know my mental hunger is valid? What if it isn't valid? When you say, okay, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, that actually leads you to the next question is, well, what the fuck does valid even mean? I
Yeah,
made that term up in my head. Well, if it's made up, if it's an illusion, well, then why do I have to keep living in this illusion? And then you get to do whatever the fuck you want.
yeah. You can uncreate it. You created it, so then uncreate it and create
Right.
something different. And the
Yep.
challenging thing is, we live in a world where people are living in the illusion of their own prisons, and they're
Mm-hmm.
agreeing with the prisons they live in and being like, even professionals and clinical professionals, and it's so dangerous of saying, I remember coaching a
Yeah.
lovely client, Grace. She was, I think, 18 when she came to me. She's fully in freedom now. I was going to say recovered, but I'm changing my wording. She's
Mm-hmm.
fully in freedom, living her best life. And she came to me on a meal plan from the NHS, and
Mm-hmm.
this meal plan wasn't serving her anymore because she wanted to eat like whole fucking cheesecakes. And the meal
Yeah.
plan didn't allow that. So
Mm-hmm.
she was told from the NHS when she was starting to,
Mm-hmm.
like, quote unquote binge eat, she was told she was doing, to keep a food plan and write
Yeah.
down if she wants to eat sugar in copious amounts, and
Mm-hmm.
talk about, is there something else I want instead? Maybe I should call a friend. Maybe I should have a slice of cheesecake in moderation. And I was like, how the hell can someone in anorexia recovery, and
Yeah.
let's not label it, in any recovery from any eating disorder, eating moderation when that's the whole problem in the
Yeah.
entire first place? So once she
Mm-hmm.
really trusted me into, like, literally, Grace, eat whatever, if you want to eat 5 cheesecakes, enjoy every second of the 5 cheesecakes. And she was like, I'm so scared, Victoria, this is binge eating. I can't stop eating. And I was like, trust the process. And now she's like, oh my God, I literally don't even want a cheesecake anymore.
Exactly. And honestly, maybe this is my own just like ego validation, but I love that you just said professionals can be so dangerous
Yeah.
because one of my favorite, and I'm being very sarcastic here, one of my favorite negative reviews of one of my books, How to Beat Extreme Hunger, all of the reviews are positive except for one. And this one review says, Lived experience and independent research are very important, but it's dangerous to take medical or psychological recommendations from someone who is drawing a lot of conclusions um, and is not a professional. And that is
Oh my
just,
God.
when I read that, I was like, you were trapped in your own prison. You were
Yeah.
conforming with the system. Because if I would ask this person, okay, why is it dangerous? They'd say, because you're not trained. And if you go, okay, well, why is that dangerous? Because you don't have a degree. Well, why is that dangerous?
Yeah.
There's no answer because who the fuck decides what's dangerous? I mean, I personally was told when I was 15 little years old, you're just going to have to accept the fact that you're not never going to get better. I was told this by the top psychologist for eating disorders in the Netherlands. Like, would her work be safer than working with one of us who,
No.
by any standard measure, is totally unqualified to be doing? Or you could flip
Absolutely.
it around. We are more qualified than anyone because we have lived and walked and found freedom on this path ourselves.
And people want what we have. When I
Mm-hmm.
hire a coach, I don't give a shit about what
Yeah.
degree they've got or what they've
Mm-hmm.
been. All I see is like, I want what that person has. Show me
Yes.
how to get it for myself.
Exactly.
So it
Exactly.
doesn't matter what tick box or what study. I remember when I first started coaching, I used to say to my clients, you know, we do a lot of therapy type stuff in our
Mm-hmm.
sessions, and we do a lot still like NLP, audit like acceptance and commitment therapy,
Mm-hmm.
what's that, internal family systems, etc., etc. And I say to them, I'm not qualified or certified in these things
Mm-hmm.
because I chose to be a coach because I get complete freedom. I don't have to abide by any
Right.
rules or any guidelines. No one's watching me. I get to do whatever the hell I want.
Yeah.
So why would I go and study psychology for 4 years? I'm not saying I know it all, when the transformations I support my clients through, including myself, why
Mm-hmm.
do I need to study for 4 years to get a result or not even get the results that I already get from living it?
Exactly. And this is so funny you said that because I'm exactly the same way. And I know when it comes to like school and education, we are so aligned because school and the system, it is all training us to be cogs in the system. And for me, when I started coaching, the amount of messages I got from people on Instagram telling me wasn't qualified, I shouldn't be doing this, even people who basically said, after I published Rainbow Girl, you shouldn't have written a book about autism and anorexia because you're not qualified. And I'm like, okay, well, why is there no other
Oh,
book about autism and anorexia then? Like, if everyone was so qualified, then why didn't they write it? Well, still not here. 2 years later, probably 5 years later, still not. Anyways, my mom was saying to me because I was getting all this like attack. She was like, maybe you should go to school. Maybe you should get a
oh
psychology
no.
degree. And yeah, because she is very good at projecting her own fear onto me. She's Libby, I just want to protect you, and I'm like, no,
Yes.
you're not protecting me. You're protecting your own fucking ego. You're giving you fear or somewhere to go, and I'm not. I'm not gonna be the energetic channel here.
No.
And I told her I'm intentionally not choosing to get qualified because if I did, in that would be driven by fear of these people,
Yeah.
which wouldn't go away because then they'd have something else to judge me about, even if I was qualified, if they really wanted to. And
Yeah.
B, because I didn't, like you said, I didn't want to work based on a framework that someone else had decided was the framework I had to work from. I
Yeah.
work from my own framework. I'm sure, you're the same way, but when I coach someone, I am so intuitive as a coach. I
Mm.
show up to sessions, I don't plan out all the things we're going to talk about. No, we're going to talk about what the energy is bringing us in that moment.
Yeah.
That's the thing we're going to talk about. And sometimes we don't talk, and sometimes it's the energy exchange that
Mm.
heals in and of itself. There's no way to make any of this tangible, and that's why it's so powerful.
It is. It's the energy, like you say,
Mm-hmm.
100%. We're natural healers, just
Mm-hmm.
naturally without really choosing to do that. It's the energy that's healing the other person's energy. And what does an expert even mean
Yeah,
anyway?
we
And so
made
the
it up.
people
Yeah.
that are drawn to us, I mean, I have the same, like I have 5 star on my podcast primarily, and then I've got a few 1 stars. So it's so fun. I mean,
Well,
I
yeah,
mean that's what happens when you put yourself out there, right? I don't care.
right.
I had someone comment yesterday on YouTube. It was so funny that this person took the time to say that. It wasn't mean, but she said, "Your content is great, but the swearing and cussing is unnecessary and distracting." And I'm like, "Well, go and fucking listen to somebody else then who doesn't swear."
Ex- exactly. And like, yeah, I mean, that's the same with the Extreme Hunger book. Like, there are 24 5-star reviews. There's one 1-star review without even, I mean, one 1-star rating without even a review.
Oh,
And I'm
come
like,
on.
what? Like, why? Why would you do that with your time? Like, we have such precious energy and time on this planet, and you are wasting it by being negative. Like, even that YouTube comment, I've gotten a few YouTube comments like that too. Not about the swearing, but the other day it was, you're great and your content is great, but some of the things you say just don't make any sense. And I'm like, what? Like, what? Why would you even comment that? I was, it was, yeah.
I mean,
So,
whatever you put out, you receive, right? And
yeah,
I mean, we need like a 5 hour podcast, don't we?
yeah,
We really do.
we
Well,
do.
there'll be
We
more to
do.
come. But let's get
Definitely.
really tangible with Quasi recovery.
Mm-hmm.
If someone's listening to this and they're like, "That's me. I'm in Quasi recovery," like I've changed so much that my life is tolerable now. I can look normal in quotes from the outside,
Mm-hmm.
although I want to say I'm not here to be normal, I'm here to be free.
I
But
was about to say, like, if you are looking normal, I'm concerned.
yeah, please don't be normal. That's like an
Please,
insult.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like someone's recovered enough to be okay. Um, what do you want to say to that person to enable them the space? What word am I looking for? I'm seeing like a runway in my mind, the path for them to choose to run down. Like, what are we saying to these people who are stuck in quotes in quasi recovery?
I think the first thing that comes up is have like ask yourself what you want out of life. Not like let's completely cut the eating disorder and recovery and
Yes.
anything that has to do with this out of the picture.
Yeah.
But I'd invite you to ask yourself, what do you want your life to mean for you? And then the next step is, are my current actions aligning with that? And if yes, great, keep on going. But I'm assuming that if they're listening to this, they're not.
Mm.
And then the question is, okay, well, what actions will I take? Not do I have to take or should I take? What
Nope.
actions will I take to align my behavior with the person that I want to be, with the life that I want to live? Because
Yeah.
when you ask yourself those questions and you show up and you take responsibility for the answers that arise within you, not the answers on YouTube, not the answers on Instagram, not even the quote unquote answers in this podcast,
Hmm.
the answers that arise within the love that is you, well, there's no there's no going wrong there because
No,
love always leads you to exactly where you should be.
exactly that. What if someone says, I literally have a hair in my nose? I'm sorry, I had to get out. Oh,
We have a lot of hairs in our nose, you know?
we do have a lot of hairs in our
I know,
nose.
I'm just kidding.
I have dog hair in my nose. That's
Oh,
usually
oh,
from the care
hero's hair.
there is hair. What if someone's like, but I don't know who I want to be. I don't know what I want.
Well, there's always going to be, but I don't know. And the thing about knowledge is that by definition, knowledge is something that has happened previously, right? So I'm thrilled for you that you don't know. Because that I mean, if you knew, then I'd be why are you even fucking listening to
Yes,
this?
why are you not already there then?
Right. If yeah, exactly. So I mean, if you don't know, well, you have opened yourself up to learning and discovering just everything because you have admitted that you don't know. It's
Yeah.
that whole idea of like you can't learn anything new unless you admit that you don't know yet. It's like if
Yeah.
I want to learn how to read Chinese, like, well, what if I don't know how to read Chinese yet? Well, then
Well,
I
you
can't
just
learn how to read Chinese.
you take the next step, don't you? And so that
Exactly.
brings me to supporting that question from my own perspective is if you don't know who you want to be, if you don't know what you want, if you don't know what you want to create, take the very smallest next step. So let's
Yes.
say you watch this podcast, Livia and myself. Who do you want? What characteristics of me and Livia do you like? What characteristics is like attractive to you. Maybe it's our confidence, maybe it's our courage, maybe it's our not giving a shit, if that's a characteristic.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be something that's pulling you, and that pull is what you want.
Yes.
And then you might have a lack of worth of like, yeah, but I can't say it, like you were saying before, I can't say what I want. I don't dare have a desire, because what if I fail? And then what if I fulfill that desire? There's all this
Mm-hmm.
fear beneath the fear beneath the fear. So anything that you're feeling drawn towards in any way, that is what you want. Follow that. You don't have to know all
Yes.
the answers. You won't know the answer. You won't know where it's going to take you. You can't see you if I drove from here to where Livia is now, which is impossible because she's in Boston and I'm in the Netherlands, but I don't need to see where she is right now in Boston to get in my car and start driving. I just have to know
Yeah.
where I'm going, aka the address, and just follow the route to get there. And I might take a
Right.
detour. So
Right.
just see what pulls you and just
Right.
follow that, and don't have it all figured out, because you won't. That's just an illusion and a trap in and of itself. Just create.
Exactly. And I mean, it's worth mentioning, like, I'm not a huge fan of this word failure because, I mean, arguably every time you fail is a time to reflect and learn. But one of my favorite quotes, again, I don't know exactly where I read it, but it was, if you're not willing to fail, you're also not willing to succeed, because these two concepts follow the exact same path, because what is one person's failure is arguably another person's success. And just one quick example here before, because I know you have your time boundary, but like for example, in Quasi, in the book, I talk about no longer being able to restrict, um, like you used to, and you could see this as a failure in your body being broken, but you could also say what an incredible success. Your body is showing up for you even after everything you've put it through. Wow. So that's also my invitation for the listener, the watcher, is everything you've framed as failures, everything you believe you will fail at, when you surrender, how can you turn that on its head? How can you say, well, how could that actually be a sign that
Mm.
I'm aligned?
Yes, and it's helping me, because what a blessing in disguise to
Mm-hmm.
not be able to physically restrict.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And my little girl is in the background. I'll show
I
you when.
hear, I hear, and I heard Wouter playing with her.
So we'll end the podcast. So if you want to see us both on again together, which I'm sure you will, let me and Livia
Yes.
know. Send us
Yeah.
questions to my inbox, please. And we'll be back. And we'll also be back with a three-way with me, Livia, and Wouter as well to
A
talk about.
three-way.
Sounds a bit dodgy, right? Just putting it out there. We'll do it on camera as well and everything, and we'll record it, and we'll go. I'm not going to go there. New Age spirituality, indeed. Yeah, that will be a very interesting podcast. So,
Yes.
Livia, thank you. And when
Thank
your book
you.
is, I mean, this is actually going to launch next week already. So
Okay.
people need to. Is there a wait list yet or not? Where they can.
If they get, well, I got kind of tired of making wait list for every book because there are so many at this point. So what they can do is I have like a general, like they can just get on my weekly newsletter where I post updates about everything, and that is livelabelfree.com/join. And when they sign up, they'll actually immediately get like an auto response list of free resources that I have. So yeah, then and they'll be the first to know about everything.
There you go. So get on the list. I'll put Livia's links below, of course. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Much love.
And there you have it, a quite extensive sneak peek of my book, How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery. You can grab your copy along with the Discovery Workbook, of course, per June 24, 2025 in all formats at livelabelfreebooks.com, on Amazon, or find the ebook on all the major online retail places. Happy reading or listening, and I'll catch you next time.